So, welcome to a chat about skin for menopause with me, Caroline Gaskin, and my lovely colleague, Fiona Eadie. So, just super briefly, I'm a homeopath of 25 years. Wow, quarter of a century, dishing out remedies, and I do a lot of naturopathic work, advice, and have been working in the menopause space for intensively for about 5 years, hormones and workshops for 10 years, sort of targeted at balancing hormones. But what that shows you is the menopause conversation is an emerging conversation in our practice. And I think that we need to own that we weren't taught menopause as a separate subject, that thankfully it's beginning to be taught in our colleges. And that goes exactly the same for your GP. And obviously an endocrinologist, consultant is trained in hormones, but still learning about menopause. So over to you, Fiona.
Hi, yes, my name's Fiona Eadie and I work under the name of Homeopathy Nature, and I'm a homeopath, and I also work a lot with nutrition and with functional medicine testing. I use the Dutch test a lot, which is really relevant for menopause and for all hormonal issues. And I've talked about this before, but Dutch is really useful because I look at a lot of test results. And what I see is that often what we think are the problems at menopause, so we assume that it's all about, our problems are all due to reducing estrogen in particular, but what I'll actually see is something quite different when I look at people's test results. And often it's a lot to do with stress. A lot of menopause symptoms are to do with how our adrenal glands are functioning, and how much cortisol we're producing and if we're doing it in the right way. And a lot of menopause is about how we're detoxifying our hormones, because really the way you break them down and excreting them is as important as the amount you produce. And often people are producing a really good amount, but it's the excretion and the breaking them down that's a problem. And Caroline and I have are doing the course next week. We're starting the second national second intake, and I see that a couple of people in tonight's chat are coming to the course as well, so it's going to be great to meet you all. And that's 6 weeks of coaching, of homeopathic remedies, and lots of information and community. Yes, we're really excited about that, and tonight we're just going to doing a little 45-minute pop-up to talk about all things skin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Skin at Menno.
Yeah. I wanted to say that I have been at work all day seeing clients, and I mentioned that to you just now, Fiona, before we came on air. And I started at 9, and I thought I had space in my day, and a bit of time to just potter in the middle. But sometimes it doesn't work out, or often doesn't work out like that. So, I got to now about to do this chat and thought, I feel a bit unnecessarily stressed. So spent a lot of time at the laptop, felt pressured in 1 or 2 cases, felt relieved with two of my cases who have done amazingly well. And one's been working with menopause symptoms for quite some time. And we've just done exactly what Fiona said. We spent a long time with her dealing with a lot of stress. So remedies that support her in stress, and supplements that support her in stress, and some practices that support her in stress. The stress isn't going away, and in fact she's had more stress in the time that I've seen her, coming in from different directions, unexpected directions. So sometimes we expect stress, and I would say to a client, what have you got coming up in the month ahead? And that will help me with a prescription. With this particular client, lots of new things come in during that time, and some of them very close and personal, close to home, and really quite worrying. So health concerns with immediate family, that kind of thing. So a lot had come in, and we'd finally got, we'd done a lot of cleansing, done a lot of remedies for the stress, and we finally got to a very kind of traditional, constitutional, hormonal remedy, and she's doing really well. I'm I think that if I'd have prescribed that remedy initially, she probably would have done what we call an aggravation, that she would have felt worse and it might have taken her a long time to get better. So I'm really kind of celebrating that we've got to what feels like a nicely balanced place in spite of all these stresses. And this is something that we saw with a lot of people on the course last time we did the course, because we started from that perspective of cleanse, detox, balance blood sugar, putting simple practices in place. And those are often what's needed to come back to when things go out of kilter again, which they always will. So today I'm feeling a bit stressed, and Fiona, what do I need?
I would go with at the moment, I would go with a calming tea, something with chamomile in it, a sleepy tea. I would be looking at prioritizing your sleep, because you've been ramping up cortisol all day with all those clients, and
Yep.
you're not in a circadian rhythm. You're going to be now, you've pushed yourself too far. We're coming into dusk now. You shouldn't be looking at blue lights on a screen. So you really want to sort of dim your lights, bath with Epsom salts in. Really prioritize your sleep, because you're going to have a really wired brain. So maybe a remedy like Nux vomica to switch off that churning in the brain would be really helpful. A homeopathic sleep combination would be ideal for you. And I would say get to bed nice and early and have that kind of wind down in bed, because that's the thing, you're going to just be firing. Your body thinks it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the moment.
So true.
Yeah. And
Perfect.
it's funny, isn't it, how much you forget all those self-care things that you have in your cupboards and you have in your bathroom. An oil in the bath would be really nice as well.
Absolutely.
Lavender, chamomile, something on the pillow.
See how easy that is to reset and for someone to feed back to you. So it's really beautiful. And guess what? A really good friend of mine gave me the other day, chamomile grown on her allotment.
So you can just put that straight in the bath if it's dried.
Yeah. And then a cup of tea. So the other thing that I read this morning, which, like you, we're always kind of like educating and reading, and I'm halfway through listening to something on, the latest on magnesium. A lot of this is new. A lot of this we need to study. But there's a fantastic article that came through this morning about swapping up our superfoods, and I'm somebody who tries to go local if I can. And I appreciate that. I do very well, for instance, on a superfood called ashwagandha, which is not grown in the UK where I live. But out the back of my house, I've got 4 tubs with lemon balm in. And lemon balm is a fantastic, relaxing evening tea for women at menopause, women who are feeling a bit stressed, particularly for women, would go really well with the chamomile. And I don't have to go all that way, to India to pick up my ashwagandha. It's like these things grow close to home, and even better, they're extremely low cost. They're very easy to grow here, so this is kind of our approach, is to start from what we've got on the doorstep, to start with simple practices. So I've got a really great kind of matrix tonight, but we wanted to talk about skin, and I'm going to ask you, Fiona. You said let's talk about skin because you'd said about some dry skin. So where should we start with that?
Well, so I've just been on holiday. I was in Portugal, and I was doing a lot of surfing. And I had that sea, little bit too much sun, loads of wind, actually. It was quite cold. And the surf photographer, when I was leaving the water, I caught a really good wave and I waved at the guy and he took a photo of me. And then I got sent the photo and I look like 170 years old. I mean, and I was like, wow, I haven't seen myself from that angle. And I know that there were mitigating circumstances, but still I was like, okay, now what do I tell people to do? A bit like you, what do I tell people to do in this situation? Because to be honest, I have, it's not something that I've really focused on, and I know a lot about it. And I was just like, this is time for me to do something. And so that's why, I mentioned it to you. It's the dry, there's a dryness, there's a lack of, I'm losing kind of the suppleness of the skin as well. And I think there's a certain point when it's noticeable. And I know this is vanity, but it's important to me. And what
It's
I
really
think is
important.
really interesting is that if I can work with those signs of what's happening with my skin, that there will be, they're signs of what my body needs at a much deeper level. If it's showing on the skin, then what does that mean is happening in the internal picture? And I think that's what's as interesting as me not, wanting to look too wrinkly.
Yeah. All of the above. Yeah, no, that's great. So first off, I think it's important to understand about the skin. So we have two layers to the skin: the epidermis, the mantle, the outside, and then the dermis, the inner layer, which is thicker and cushioned, and where our actual fat cells are. So a lot of us think that when our skin gets dry, those fat cells are really diminishing. It's often as much to do with mineral wealth, and a variety of antioxidants in the diet. So there's lots of places we could start from with the skin, but basically the truly dry skin is more of a medical condition, and might be associated with certain pathologies, or long courses of medication and things like cytotoxic chemotherapy type drugs, things that genuinely diminish the fat cell in the skin. So that being said, we do want to nourish the skin, and really the best thing to reach for in the diet is essential fatty acids, to make sure that we are accessing food which is not overly processed, and that we are accessing fresh food as much as possible. Most people are able to process oxalates. So there's a big conversation at the moment about oxalates. How much can we digest fibrous, difficult vegetables? We're designed to be able to do that. We need to chew our food efficiently. If we're not chewing our food efficiently, we don't make the right digestive enzymes. So that's kind of like from the get-go, chew properly, eat slowly. The worst culprits for not digesting their food are vegans who eat too fast. So they're perhaps not having the diversity of food that they need, and certainly not eating it slowly enough to digest what they're eating. So the more complex, vegetables and etc. we're going to eat, we do need to chew them. We do need to produce digestive enzymes like cellulase to process those foods. That being said, we are finding more people are having difficulty digesting that sort of food, and we do find at menopause that we need to perhaps add in digestive enzymes, or add in foods which help create those digestive enzymes, and because we lose the capacity to make them as we get older. So we can eat with more intention, we can chew our food, we can eat more slowly, we can honor the food that we eat, in terms of time. Perhaps we need to eat certain foods that stimulate certain digestive enzymes. So it could be choosing things like pineapple and papaya, bromelains and papain, which, for instance, help us digest our food. It could be eating certain things that are kind of quite traditional, like a bit of artichoke or radish. These stimulate the digestive enzymes so that we then go into our meal eating more efficiently. And a lot of these things we should know, but we've kind of fallen out of the habit of eating them. And it goes without saying almost that processed food just doesn't have those nutrients in. So essential fatty acids and these digestive enzymes, prebiotics, are the precursors, because skin, whatever's going on, is a reflection of what's going on inside. So if we are dehydrated in the skin, I will always ask a client about their timeline. What's their skin been like throughout their life? And if they've used hydrocortisone cream, for instance, for an eczema, dermatitis, or rash, then they will definitely need to put minerals back in at some point in their life. And if they haven't done that, it's really going to show up at menopause. Just one last thing before I come over to you is sometimes we look at where things erupt on the body. So I'll come back to that in a minute, but the location of skin issues can give us an indication of what's going on as well. So talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you were saying that about collagen and how much collagen has dropped out of our diet. So, things like gelatin, jelly, I mean, a lot of them are obviously animal-based. People used to eat things like pig's trotters, and in other countries like, Korea and Asia, they eat much more kind of collagen-y parts of the animal. And then we're now in this place where everyone's talking about collagen supplements. But something that I prefer to collagen supplements is bone broth, because bone broth contains the collagen, but the collagen is combined with things like glucosamine, which is really great for your joints, chondroitin. There is something in bone broth that's similar to human growth factor, which is the massive anti-aging, sort of nootropic at the moment that's illegal, but this is the thing that starts diminishing in age. And bone broth also contains protein. So protein enables us to make muscle, and we have facial muscles as well. So if you're supporting your face muscles with collagen, because there is a skin collagen loss in midlife, and that is kind of quite an easy way. You can get, and also you can get powdered bone broth, you can get the liquid ones. You just have to be careful to get organic, because there can be quite a lot of dyes and starches and things added to the powdered ones. But that's quite a good swap for a mid-morning drink. So it's not particularly expensive, and it's much cheaper than taking collagen supplements. And I feel that although it's not hydrolyzed collagen, which is supposed to be the most bioavailable, that when you're taking the collagen in that very traditional format and it's surrounded by those other micronutrients, that it has, the body knows what to do with it. And again, it's deeply working on the gut and replacing that mucosal layer. So for me, it feels a bit like, the traditional Chinese medicine model of that kind of dryness, systemic dryness in the body that you want to replace with kind of juicy yin, moisturizing, nourishing foods and substances. And that's how bone broth feels to me. It feels like a sort of yin, calming, very nutritious and very sort of juicy for the whole body. So that's so I've come back and I've got my collagen powder out of the cupboard basically, and I was thinking like, this is something that I'm going to be getting into now.
What I will say, I know there's one vegan in the room, there might be more. I will share a recipe with you afterwards for a vegan bone broth, or a vegan collagen broth. It's not bone broth, vegan collagen broth. That was devised by Daphne Lambert, who is 70. She's vegan. She has the most phenomenal skin. But I will say of Daphne that she is a cook. She is a chef. She works on one of the retreats that I work on, the Men of Heaven retreat. And I only go not to do my talk, but to eat Daphne's food. Not really. But she spends her whole life immersed in creating amazing food, foraging, growing, brewing food, and so on the course, and generally Fiona and I both fans of fermented foods. So I mentioned digestive enzymes. These are prebiotics. We have probiotics which populate the lower bowel. So rather than stimulating the top of the bowel to the digestive system to do its work, prebiotics, the probiotics which populate the lower bowel. And so if we've got constipation or an absorption issue lower in the body, lower in the system, then we might need to look at probiotics. And particularly at menopause, we look at the bifidus probiotics, so the thousands of strains of probiotics. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're not able to digest the vegetables, then you might need to look at certain probiotics that help you digest oxalates, spinach, rhubarb, difficult to digest stuff, but which we should be able to do. We've done it for millennia. We've just messed our guts up through the 20th century. And we started out at the beginning of the 20th century with arsenic-based preparations. Before the 20th century, we were using mercury-based preparations. These were our medications. in the 1930s, we introduced probiotics. From those early 30 years of the 20th century, we began to ruin our gut so that we don't have the absorptive capacity that we once did. And this is why we've got these problems. We can't digest simple foods efficiently. So we need to do something, use foods in a targeted way, perhaps even use our homeopathic remedies. We start off the remedies on the course from this point of view of, how much do we cleanse, excrete, detox, etc. Yeah. So the probiotics that kind of lower bowel, we two basic ones that you can have a look at if you're taking probiotics. Have a look and see if you've got an acidophilus in there, which is a well-tested probiotic suitable for everybody. Just check what it's grown on if you're vegan. And bifidus. And what the bifidus bacteria do is they help us absorb B vitamins that are part of all of your collagen supplements. If you've got a vegan collagen supplement, it will have B vitamins in it, because we need B vitamins to begin to make collagen efficiently in the body. But what if we need to sort the gut out first and get those bifidus probiotics in, absorb the B vitamins, and then we make collagen better? So sometimes it's this process that we need to go through. And what inhibits the absorption or uses up B vitamins is stress. So like I said with my client, de-stress, she's drinking bone broth regularly, lots of things are much juicier for her, and that's what we want.
Yeah. And I think with the probiotics, so there's a couple of questions come in. So somebody was asking, I'll go back to the bone broth one. How many times a week should we have bone broth? And bone broth, you can, if it's a powder, you can get a vegan collagen powder and a vegan bone broth powder, even though it's not obviously made out of bones. It's lots of lovely things, and those very glycine vegetables. So with bone broth, you can just add it into your daily cooking. You can drink it on its own. You can put it into stocks and things. And the only caveat to bone broth, and possibly to probiotics as well, is someone's asked about histamine in the chat. So if you do have a histamine sensitivity, then you are very likely to be sensitive to bone broth and also to probiotics. So with probiotics, there are specific low histamine probiotics you can take. And with bone broth, what you want to be doing is having bone broth that's been cooled very quickly, because when bone broth is cooling down, that's when the histamine levels increase. And if you're having histamine levels on your skin, which is something we do see a lot at menopause, because histamine is inhibited by estrogen. So as our estrogen levels are naturally dropping to the appropriate level post-menopause, because we're not ovulating anymore, so we don't need high estrogen levels, what can happen is histamine can start to flare. So if you're somebody who's had histamine issues, perhaps you're the sort of person who's always reacted to insect bites, perhaps you're the sort of person who always gets heat rash and hives, or you've got real tendency to hay fever. What you'll see at menopause is often that will come up to be seen. But histamine is much like any other food. It's sort of like, you can treat it like a food intolerance. So what you do is you take out histamine foods, you take them out for quite a long time, you heal the gut, and then the gut will stop flaring to histamine. So again, as Caroline said, there's so much about menopause and the gut. And that's one way that we can see how menopause and the gut and skin are directly related. So we do cover histamine in more depth on the course as well, because it is something that's so common. And what you'll see at menopause is itchy skin, food intolerances, it's very linked into hot flashes. A lot of the symptoms we see at menopause can, if you are that histamine person, really that will resolve so much for you if you follow a pathway of managing that.
Yeah, I had histamine flare-ups, which we didn't have that label, but this was pre-menopause. I don't think I'd really got, it must have been sort of early perimenopause, and I didn't really know if I had an insect bite that kind of flared, and I could tell that, but I'd also used my friend's posh sun cream. It was away on holiday, and there was some other factor, Oh yeah, I was taking some Chinese herbs that I think were aggravating me in that form. I'm quite a sensitive person, and it was just this sort of cocktail that created a histamine, an overreaction basically. I mean, the biggest thing was stopping the Chinese herbs, and obviously the insect bite calming down. Would have taken some remedies for that, but it was interesting to see that flare up, and then later I had some insect bites that were actually tick bites, but they were fine. They were fine for ages. So I knew I didn't have Lyme disease or anything like that going on. But about 5 months later, I went through a period of stress, and all those sites where I'd had the tick bites, 4 of them or something, flared really, really itchy rash. And what that actually showed me, because just itchy skin, can be a sign of thyroid. So we said we'd talk a little bit about thyroid. If the skin, and there isn't an eruption, I mean, I had insect bites, so it was at the site of the bites. The bites had gone, but it was where they'd been, where the skin flared up. And that showed, what actually it showed was I had quite high viral and bacterial load. And because I was stressed, I'd kind of let down my barriers, if you like, and was letting too much in. So I saw a homeopath, and he worked in a particular way, and we reduced that viral and bacterial load with homeopathic remedies. So that's an example of using homeopathy to rebalance the virome and the microbiome in the body. So we can do that. We need much more kind of work and studies and kind of like really recording our cases, I think, to show that this is what we're actually doing as homeopaths, which is really quite fascinating. And it's a very gentle approach for somebody like me who's very sensitive to mainstream medicine. And, again, I saw another client earlier today who's doing incredibly well. And she's been doing a meditation type practice alongside her homeopathic remedies. And the two things together mean that she has far less flare ups in the gut, far less. She hasn't had a mast cell response for ages. She's able to tolerate a wider variety of foods. She's able to tolerate foods that she's not been able to tolerate in all the time I've known her. So that's come about through managing the stress, through dealing with the things that, again, Fiona and I both say this, that things come up with menopause, often at a quite kind of personal level. Your life story comes up for a bit of an airing, bit of a reappraisal, bit of like reclaiming boundaries, maybe marking out boundaries for the first time in your life. And the skin is your integument, it's your mantle, it's your cover. So this kind of like re-establishing boundaries, or establishing boundaries for the first time in your life, saying no to things that perhaps you've always saying yes to. This is all part of the process, and all part of creating a more flexible approach to life.
Yeah, and you see, and I think it's interesting as well that you see we often see people with acne coming up at menopause. So, and with that, you'll see that was from, often when you talk to the client about how their first periods were, that they will have had acne then that's cleared and is now come back again. And there's this real, there's physical sort of things that haven't been resolved that come back at menopause, as well as emotional, lots of things that you think, the feeling of not being safe, that was really my experience as a teenager. I came back so strongly in perimenopause. And I feel that the emotional state round about puberty often sort of gets played out again. It's so interesting.
So true. Sorry, I was just laughing. I got angry.
You can hear, yeah, exactly. It's the last time you really screamed and shouted and told people what you thought of them. But that kind of like uncontrollable anger can come back again. And it's a real chance to resolve it all. That's the beautiful thing, is you get to now resolve it. Whereas before, your hormones just came in and shut everything down, and you became very compliant, after you've gone through puberty. So it is amazing.
It is. And estrogen, if we talk about the kind of archetypes of the hormones, estrogen's definitely the yes hormone because it brings you to fertility. It necessarily I often say this, it necessarily puts you in competition with other women because, you need to compete for the male in order to fertilize the egg. We're pretty basic when it comes down to it. And it might not, my feminist self might kind of rail against that, but kind of true when it comes down to it. I just wanted to say a little bit about where things come up on the body, and this is true of acne. I see someone else has asked a question about rosacea in the chat box, and we'll come to that in a minute. But with acne type spots, I never really had those types of spots. I must have had spots somewhere along the line, but it could be that where these come up is showing us something. So quite classically, if spots are coming up here, just in the corners that below the corners of the mouth, that in terms of facial diagnosis or analysis is the ovary area. So the chin itself is kidneys, the upper cheeks and lower cheeks, heart and lungs. So where we erupt might show us an organ that needs a conversation. Women will often say about spots coming up in the jawline and the neck. Of course, that is where a man grows a beard, so it might indicate that there's a little bit of imbalance with testosterone that needs to be balanced out for some reason. And I said to somebody today, she's another client going through a period of stress, and that dealing with that stress will mean that she can't make progesterone. And progesterone, I call our feel-good hormone. When we feel safe, we make progesterone, and we feel nourished, we feel balanced, we feel stronger, we feel more flexible, more able to look into the future and the past, less kind of present and stressed. So it's a very good hormone for us. What makes us bloom during pregnancy, great skin, great hair. It's all about progesterone. So yeah, there's this kind of dynamic relationship about those. Again, if women are getting spots on the chest or the shoulders, the back, again, this is where men grow hair. So it usually shows me that we need to look to the male hormones and get things back in balance from that perspective. And an indication for perhaps the thyroid playing up is dryness just here below the elbow or below the knee on the front of the shins. So dry patches there can indicate that the thyroid is underfunctioning. Dryness generally can show us that the thyroid is underfunctioning. And the other indication might be loss of hair at the corner of the eyebrows. Loss of eyebrow hair generally, but particularly at the corners of the brow, will show that the thyroid is underfunctioning. Shedding hair in periods of shedding. So less kind of like general falling hair all over, but shedding in bouts, I tend to think of as thyroid. In fact, irregular sweats on the palm, soles can indicate thyroid. And, dryness could be nails. It could be that you see it in your nails being dry, splitting, breaking off, flaking off, that kind of thing. So again, my kind of number one there would be what's happening with omega oils. And a decent essential fatty acid should have your nails looking strong and shiny. Nails should be naturally shiny. Nails are the area of the body that have the most photons, the most light in them. So they're a little bit, for us, they're a bit like the antlers of a deer or a creature. And so they're kind of like reading the environment. There's definitely not enough conversation. And of course, it sounds pretty gross, but if your nails are chipped or uncomfortable, I just feel uncomfortable if my nails are chipped, cracked, not smooth. They're like a radar. So they're kind of like an early warning system for us. Nails are also a reflection of the state of your liver. So if you've got fungal nails or you've got dryness in the nails, that's showing that the liver needs nourishment. It needs cleansing if you've got fungal nails.
And that's interesting because the fungal nail pharmaceutical product is so toxic to the liver. So you've just
Oh,
doubled
I
down
know.
it. You've already challenged liver with
Yeah.
a real liver shocker
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
well.
A nice thing, actually, if anyone is listening and has got nail problems, you can use a bit of neem oil on the nails. That can be very good, particularly for fungal nails. It has some antifungal kind of properties. But to be honest, I'd go and see a homeopath and get some liver remedies, maybe do some liver cleansing. Um, should we talk with somebody else about rosacea, and can it be prescribed for homeopathically? Yes, you need to look at prescription for the liver as well as for um, female hormones. Rosacea is an inflammatory condition, so we might be, on the food perspective, be looking at anti-inflammatory foods and checking in with, are there any foods which make it worse or causing inflammation systemically in the system. So I remember once seeing it's a remedy, rosacea, in a client who'd never had it before, never had anything like it before, and she took oregano oil internally. So that's pure essential oregano oil. And she's a sensitive person, basically it wrecked her gut, and she got rosacea. It took a long time to claw back from that. So we need to approach, strong substances gently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say on air, I'm going to say nobody should take essential oils, pure essential oils internally. What I mentioned earlier on were essential fatty acids, which are different, but pure essential oils like, your pine, your lavender, all those things. I personally would be extremely careful about using those internally.
Yeah, they're so strong. And
Mhm.
I see rosacea as being, you said inflammation, but heat as well. So that kind of,
Yeah,
what's caffeine doing, what
yeah,
are spicy foods doing, what's alcohol doing, that kind of sensitivity of the blood vessels, that they're showing you kind of, again, what's happening at a deeper level, that the system is firing, running too hot and it's firing too quickly. So
mhm,
I would imagine as well within that kind of, what are your stress levels as well,
mhm.
is going to be part of your healing picture. So yeah,
Yeah,
like, it does come up a lot at menopause as well. And again, the clients that I saw, a client who'd had a terrible flare of it, never had it before, after doing a really intense detox, a massive Christmas, like she'd gone crazy on the booze and whatever, and then booze and the terrible food, and then went like totally cold turkey, really hardcore kind of an unsupported cleanse that was quite
yeah,
difficult and not very loving, and the reaction was on her, really showed on her skin, and she'd already been living at a super high level in an ad agency, just too much cortisol. So I think,
yeah,
yeah, calming the whole system is what you need to be looking at with rosacea,
yeah,
hormonally, mentally.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It is an inflammatory condition, and we could take, I mean, with yeah, I mean, we are beginning. I talked about probiotics earlier. Somebody asked what's the difference between prebiotics and probiotics, and I think I probably answered that. But basically, prebiotics support the top end of the system, so from the mouth down to the stomach and the beginning of the small intestine. Prebiotics are doing their work, stimulating the liver to do its work. And then as we move through the gut towards the end of the gut, we move into the probiotic realm. And so they have actions like stimulating the body to do its digestive work, and then probiotics, particularly around absorption of the foods, once we've broken things down. So on that, kefir is a wonderful probiotic, and milk kefir particularly has been, I don't know of studies on other types of kefir, but milk kefir has been proven to reduce cholesterol. And of course, it's really rich in your B vitamins, and it's rich in your bifidus. So it ticks a lot of boxes at menopause. And you might mix a bit of kefir with sort of a fiber powder, so your sieves, etc., ground in the morning as part of your breakfast, making quite a good matrix then to start the day and to anchor cortisol. But there I have, so yes, those coconut vegan yogurts are extremely expensive. And I have made a very good coconut um, yogurt by using a probiotic capsule, breaking it into coconut milk, organic coconut milk, which is so much cheaper, and you can make your own yogurt or kefir. So, there are options, and again, it's a kind of growing market. Someone's asked for. We'll look at some bone broths to recommend. Is there a homeopathic remedy for weak bladder? Yes, lots. And has loads and loads of remedies. And weak bladder, again, is a symptom that can come up at menopause, because as our hormones change, so does some of the action around the pituitary, and the posterior pituitary gland in the brain is about the kind of letdown release for vasopressin, it's called. It's part of our why we want to pee, why we have the impulse to pee. So yes, there's a few things that can happen. If a woman's suffering prolapse of the womb post menopause, then we might be looking at exercise to help strengthen the womb. I was in a Pilates class yesterday, and I was like, wow, must remember this exercise, because this is directly working on the pelvic floor and my bladder and my womb. I could feel it doing the work of strengthening that area. It's quite amazing. So lots of approaches. Let's just have a quick look at
histamine foods. So histamine foods I have a Google of, but they're basically fermented foods. So wine, probably number one. So things, especially booze made out of grapes. So if you are drinking, I would recommend moving to clear alcohol like a vodka, gin. It's also aged food. So aged cheese, mature steaks, leftovers that you've popped in the fridge, your leftover curry that you're eating the next day, leftover anything, the histamine builds up, as I talked about with the bone broth cooling down as well. So you'll find lots of other things, but for me, personally, I had some histamine issues, and definitely wine. I find wine with my clients is the key one. So
yeah. And it takes time to learn that, doesn't it? And you might have a few stumbles and then just be like, I really can't do this, and I can think of many, many clients who've realized that that's what's been driving their hormonal imbalance, and I never forget a client who came in, and she'd had terrible eczema, and we'd done really well with it. And then didn't see her for ages and ages. And she came out, she said, my eczema's back. And we had this conversation. And she said, you know what? It's the red wine. I've been drinking red wine because somebody brought round a case of organic wine. We had a look at it, had sulfites in it, because organic wine is not necessarily organically or naturally processed. And we just realized that it was the grapes, it was the histamine, it was the sulfites, it was a cocktail that wasn't doing her any favors, and her eczema was back. It was from the palms up to her elbows, and it was excruciating. So she said, okay, that's it. My boyfriend has to drink the wine. I'll have a vodka and tonic.
And I do see with my friends who are my age, where I noticed a couple of years ago when people were going into menopause, women that had been able to drink, quite a few glasses of wine were suddenly slurring after one. And it's because the histamine and those sulfites affect you in a completely different way in menopause.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I've seen a couple of people like just push through it, keep going. I'm not giving up my red wine, because somehow, it's a statement of relaxation and freedom and liberty. And it's got so many sort of, cues tied into it that women find it really hard to give up. But if you are hot flashes, I'd be looking at wine as a main culprit. And
and definitely red wine and rosé, they stimulate the adrenals more, and certainly if you've got that 3 o'clock waking. Let's just round up with a couple of things. We talked about the face and the skeleton earlier.
So one of the reasons in midlife, it's not particularly menopause, but midlife aging, is that our skulls shrink. So That's why the only you end up with saggy skin, not necessarily because of your collagen, but because the eye sockets drop back and the jaw becomes weak. And it's really interesting because the main way around that is to support our bones. So every 12 years, we have a completely new skeleton. The bone is continually breaking down, being renewed. It's renewed whenever we do exercise because the muscle pulls on the bone and causes it to lay down and lay down more cells and to strengthen. And that's why exercise is so positive for our skeleton and our frame and for being strong in our 90s or, you know, however long we're going to be going for. And it's the same with our face. So that's why things like face-a-size or facial yoga, you're developing the muscle, but you're also slightly working on the actual bone structure to prevent that kind of erosion. And then obviously supporting the bones with nutrition, with homeopathy, particularly tissue salts, is an absolutely fantastic way to work with, you know, the cards that we've been dealt that basically our skulls are shrinking. And it does sort of speed up a lot in midlife. So yeah, again, if you really feel like your skull is, you know, your facial structure is dropping, then look to your bones. It's another great sign, and plenty of time to do something about it, because you've got in 12 years you've got a whole new one. So, you know, it's worth
it's so true, you know. And I do a lot of yoga, you know, quite strenuous yoga, and I know my skeleton is stronger now. The other thing that happens, which, you know, again, I only learned relatively recently, is that you know, as the bones change, they could be, if they've got stuff stored in them, they could be releasing that into your system. So there's so if we've got heavy metals, which the body doesn't know what to do with, doesn't know how to excrete, and they get stored in the bones, as bones change, break down, that can be released into the system and cause all sorts of problems. So, you know, it's just so much to explore. I will just pop, by the way, I'll just pop the link to the course. That our next course actually starts next Tuesday, 10th of September. And it's 6 consecutive Tuesdays live with us. All of those get recorded, and you get a workbook every week, and we get homeopathic remedies included. So if you're listening live or on catch up, and you think, oh, I'm interested in that, and you haven't got the link, just drop either of us a line, and we can send that to you. And also happy to have a chat through. You know, we've got quite a few people who said, can I pay a payment scheme, you know, incrementally, etc. So yeah, great question, great last question about snoring. Anything to help snoring? Sleeping in another room, no. But snoring is changes in the soft palate. So yeah, facial yoga could be a great place to start. What were you going to say, Fiona?
I was going to say mouth taping, which is also
mouth taping, yeah.
A tiny bit of tape, or you can buy mouth tape off Amazon that goes around the mouth. That stops a lot of snoring. But and also, yeah, facial exercises where you actually extend the tongue and you start strengthening this part of the back of the throat, because everything's softening up a bit. And removing dairy from the diet is often really helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that mouth taping is very interesting, because what it's doing is training you to breathe through your nose, which of course is what you should be doing. And you'll find there's some great books on this. There's one on I think it's just called Breath. I'm halfway through reading it, and the guy was an inveterate mouth snorer, and when he started to mouth tape and breathe through his nose while he slept, his health totally changed. So yeah, Eddie says I do it, but still I snore. So face yoga, mouth tape. Let's see. But there are, yes, I think that's very interesting. Snoring's connected to the heart, I think, absolutely. And again, could look at some homeopathic remedies, you know, slightly bigger kind of conversation, because you'd be looking back at allergies and environmental sensitivities as well. But yeah, absolutely.
Someone's asked about how long the lives are. So the weekly session on the course is 1.5 hours. It is, isn't it?
Yeah, 90
And we
minutes. Yeah.
do, and then there's coaching all week. So we have a WhatsApp group. We encourage everybody to join and chat, and we share inspirational ideas on that. And really, we learn quite a lot as well. Well, I certainly did from other people sharing information. And it was really great. It was a really inspirational group of women. So it's not just the lives and the workbook. There is a real sense of community throughout the course. And we do some group work every week as well in the lives. So yeah, well, it's really, the course is set up for menopause, but it's really on how to live well for the rest of our lives, on how to take the learnings from menopause, what our body is trying to tell us, and to create a pattern for living that's going to serve us until the end of our days. So that's more our approach. And so we're teaching things that are implementable, that are easy to do, not supplement heavy, it's kind of getting you to balance and then how to hold that balance.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to say both of us are committed to, not kind of like costing the earth with this either. That, what can we, such simple things that we can put into practice, which are easy for everybody to access, whatever your wallet, that you can put into place for the rest of your life. And I really feel like we're going to need that going forward. I was talking to my mum this week, and we were talking about the not supporting elderly people in terms of fuel in the winter. And I was just like, we need to start doing some courses for the elderly, how to live well. That's what this course is pointing at. But it's something also that I've had quite a few practitioners approach and say, can I do this for me and for my clients? And I'm very much, the more women that have access to this, the better. So little resources given to us, I think, elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's so important to know how to live and how to eat. I see the elderly, it's that thing where you just start eating a couple of bits of toast, and it's so bad for you. It's so bad for your brain, your bones, your body. So this time period now is so important. You can sort of establish, you can lay down muscle, you can get strong. This is a perfect time to gear up after years of looking after kids and looking after your career and looking after everybody else. Your body is now shouting at you, come on, I want to do something else. And then listening to your body, following its cues and getting really strong and well is a fantastic piece of work. I love
it's such a gift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm going to go and find my lemon balm and that chamomile.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
Fantastic. And it's not going to be 2 o'clock anymore. It's going to be, I don't know, nice. Oh, the other thing I'm going to do is infrared sauna.
Oh, wow. Have you got one in the house? No.
Yeah, I've got a sauna bag. Love it. Yeah. So thank you very much, those of you that have attended live.
Could you just tell us where you got your sauna bath from? Because I'm dying to get one, but I don't know.
Perfect. Yeah, I will. I'll send you a link. It's super easy. Yeah. Okay, I made a note.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for all your questions. Really.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great group.
Thank you.
Someone's just run an Epsom salt bath while they're listening. Yay. Have a good evening. Bye, folks.
Bye.